Let's see. So after I read A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by Kingfisher, I went and added a bunch of other Kingfisher books to my reading list. This is one of them. It's called Bryony and Roses, and it's a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, written in third person. The main character is a young woman called Bryony. She's a merchant's daughter and also a gardener, and she's been looking after her two sisters ever since their father passed away. At the beginning of the story, she is returning home from a neighboring settlement when she gets caught out in a snowstorm and stumbles across what appears to be an abandoned manor house. Only as she takes shelter in this place, she comes across a lot of small, strange, magical happenings, like getting a warm meal seemingly out of nowhere, and she never meets any people. As she's leaving, she decides to take this really beautiful rose with her as a gift for one of her sisters, but this causes the anger of a beast who appears and demands that she leave the rose and also return to stay in the manor house in the future. He gives her 1 week to make some deliveries to her sisters and also to say goodbye. So I guess this story, a lot of the bones of it are pretty similar to popular versions of Beauty and the Beast, like the one by Disney. So you have a magical place where there is a beast living, and like his curse came about partly because like you spurned someone in the past, and he needs to find someone to love him as he is. So all of those factors are pretty much the same, but the story also has some variations. So I do like the way it ends, although since I guess that would be a spoiler, I can't really talk about it here. And I also like the humor, I guess, in the way that the story is written. Like you can see a lot of similarities in the writing style and tone between this book and the Defensive Baking book. So I guess one example is I'm kind of reminded of near the beginning when the main character is thinking to herself about how it seems really unworthwhile to die for the sake of rutabagas. Like the reason she was at the other settlement was to get rutabaga seeds from a friend of hers, and she's lamenting about how there's these really important plants like corn and wheat, where there are some civilizations out there that used to sacrifice people to these plants, whereas you've never heard of anyone sacrificing people to rutabagas, which are apparently something that's kind of like a type of turnip. And she's just thinking like, wow, like that would be such a really like ridiculous reason to lose her life. So this type of humor I think is pretty consistent throughout the narrative and just something that I enjoyed. Something that I guess I would typically not like as much was perhaps the fact that the story really didn't have a lot of characters, like other than Bryony and the Beast, like that was pretty much it. So like 90% of the narrative is focused on them, with minor appearances by other characters like Bryony's sisters and the house, which I guess you can technically count as a character even though it doesn't speak for the most part, which means that the story didn't have a lot of dialogue. I think this wasn't as much of it wasn't as off-putting as it might otherwise have been, because Bryony, like the way she thinks and like the conversations that she has with herself are really interesting, but it does create a certain kind of atmosphere to the story that I think is a lot more quiet. But yeah, in general, like it was a little bit, like I have a soft spot, I think, for fairy tale retellings, especially when they do have like somewhat different endings. So it was kind of an interesting read.